Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick Bites, the show where we tackle the restaurant headlines you need to know in as little time as possible. I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief of Nation's Restaurant News, and once again joined by my colleague, Jonathan Mays, editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Jonathan, are you staying warm? It's cold out there.
I'm warmer than you are now, actually.
You are. Further north, yet warmer. You know what is one thing that warms me up, though? Is talking about restaurants. That's what we're here to do. Hopefully it makes us nice and toasty. You know, it's especially warm is a cup of Starbucks coffee. And we're going to start right there because Starbucks just announced that they are going to lay off some employees. They have about 16,000 corporate employees. Brian Niccol, their newly crowned CEO, said that they are going to lay off an undisclosed number of employees. Jonathan, is there reason for worry? Do we think this is a bad sign for Starbucks that they're preparing to lay off some employees?
This was an inevitable sign that they were going to lay off employees. Essentially, they had a brutal year last year. One of the worst years that in its history. Actually, the worst year since, I think, 2008 for the company. They brought in Brian Niccol, threw a lot of money at him, did all sorts of other things. Eventually, you bring in a new CEO like this and tell him to fix stuff. He starts looking at things to fix. He obviously took a look at their support center teams and said, these things are way too slow. We need to fix them. And ultimately, this is going to result in some sort of reorganization, which is going to cost some people their jobs. The fact of the matter is the modern CEO today, Sam, does not like silos, and they really don't like inefficiency. And Starbucks, a very, very big company, and had developed a lot of silos and had become extremely inefficient.
That's the time. You did a good job, Jonathan. Well done. Way to kick us off. And I want to start by talking about something you just said, which is that word efficiencies. Brian Niccol said when he announced that there would be layoffs, he said, basically, if you're not attached to some sort of project or another, if you're not leading a team of people that's attached to one of the priorities, then your job is probably at risk, which is, yeah, he's looking for efficiencies. He's looking to strip out some layers from the company, which is a smart thing to do. You know, recently I talked to Twin Peaks CEO Joe Hummel, obviously much different group than Starbucks, but he said something that resonated, which is that the corporate office does not make money. The stores make money. Starbucks is a little bit of a different animal because they've obviously got a pretty big CPG part of what they're doing. They're roasting their beans. They have a lot of, they're very ingrained in their supply chain. But there's a lesson there, which is like, if you really want to make money, if you really want to improve the health of a brand, you got to invest in your storefront. You got to invest in your customer interaction, in your product, because it's the Starbucks stores that are going to make money. It's not necessarily the 16,000 employees at corporate. So I think that is what Brian Niccol is setting out to do. And I think it makes a lot of sense. There we go. We did it, John.
Yeah, corporate staff might not make any money, but you still need some corporate staff to support the stores and that sort of thing.
Truth.
All right. The next topic is America's favorite chains. The annual Technomic list, and NRN has just published some interesting things from that. Sam, your thoughts on what came out this year?
Yeah, America's favorite chains is fascinating to see because you're seeing customer sentiment among all restaurant chains out there. We break it down by menu category, we break it down by generation, and we have a top 10. And the two biggest things I want to drill into here are the fact that Nothing Bundt Cakes came out number one, America's favorite chain overall, Nothing Bundt Cakes. Totally surprised me. Here is a restaurant brand, if you can call it a restaurant brand. It's a retail shop that sells, well, bundt cakes. They really scored high on hospitality and on convenience. They were the number one fast food brand for both millennials and Gen Z. So Nothing Bundt Cakes is hugely popular, which, Jonathan, I know you have some thoughts on that. But then also for the other side of the aisle with full-service brands, you see a lot of higher-end chains really taking hold as some of the favorites among Americans. Fogo de Chão really showed up big in this list, and they were the number one brand for Gen Z. Gen Z, I would expect to be very budget conscious, but here, Fogo de Chão is their number one full-service brand. Jonathan, what do you think about those Nothing Bundt Cakes, first off, but also these higher end brands really climbing the ranks?
Yeah, well, I absolutely adore nothing but cakes, frankly. As a Midwesterner, I am required to love anything that has to do with bundt cakes. And I think the consumer ultimately really likes it. It is a model that I think works fairly well, relatively easy for franchisees to operate. Generally makes really good revenues on a per store basis. So it's a really nice concept. It's actually one of the few franchises that I would actually consider buying. Really, as far as a high end issue, people love high end steak concepts, and so Fogo is phenomenal. Fogo is also one of my favorite brands, period. It is an absolute experience. I mean, the issue always with those high-end brands is ultimately whether the consumer has the money to be able to afford it, or, whether business, is, the corporate business is coming down and things like that. Oh, I'm in trouble with the spoons.
That's okay. You said something right there that's really important, Jonathan, which is experience. Yeah. And if there's one way I can tie nothing bundt cakes in with Fogo de Chão, it would be to say birthdays. You go there for your birthday, you get a cake at Nothing Bundt Cakes, you have a nice dinner at Fogo de Chão. I think people like to celebrate at places like this.
Do you have any room if you like? Do you even have any room after eating at Fogo to have a bundt cake? I don't understand. How do the people who has the ability to consume all those calories to be able to do that?
It's these people celebrating birthday weeks. It's not just a birthday; it's a birth week now. You know that, right? So every day of the week they have another bite of their bundt cake. Anyway, we move on to our last subject, and that is that Hy-Vee, the supermarket chain, recently announced that they are going to shutter their 79 Wahlburgers that were open in their locations, convert them back to a proprietary brand. Wahlburgers, of course, started by Mark Wahlberg, the actor, and his family. They have a reality show. This is, obviously a pretty well-known concept because of how famous Mark Wahlberg is. They had over 100 locations. This is going to take them down to about 40. Jonathan, should Mark Wahlburgers be worried? What's wrong with this concept?
I don't think anything is necessarily wrong with the concept itself. I think it's just not a really good fit, frankly, to put a concept like Wahlburgers into a supermarket chain like Hy-Vee. I just don't think that's, you go to a grocery store and you're not necessarily always thinking about a sit-down meal. And, so that basically makes your potential customer base relatively small. And for a concept like Wahlburgers, those occasions, the occasions that happen at a supermarket, eatery or whatever you have, that is fundamentally about convenience. People usually want to take their food with them. And, but you're just really limited in what you can do. In your customer base is limited. The occasion is definitely limited, and it was just a tough thing from the get-go. Nothing really wrong with Wahlberg. It's just not. It just wasn't a fit.
I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I have not gone to shop for groceries at a grocery store in years, and that's because my wife and I do pickup all the time. We always just order online and then we pick them up. So if you're not going inside a grocery store, you're sure as heck are not going to be ordering food from their restaurant in the grocery store. Look, I'm not projecting to everybody, but I'm just saying that's sort of the trend, especially with younger customers. I don't know how many of them are actually going in there, and then do they get the meal as well. Wahlburgers, too, is a weird fit, I thought, initially for Hy-Vee, because it is more of a full-service restaurant. And so for a supermarket to partner with a chain it's a little bit more known for upscale burgers and full service, that's just maybe not the greatest fit, whether you're owned by a very famous actor or not. Now, look, I think Mark Wahlberg's going to be okay. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's got a movie coming out next week, I believe. But he also opened another restaurant concept called Flecha Cantina that I believe he would like to invest in going forward. Now, the one last thing I will say about this is I would suspect any novelty brand, I'm going to say it, novelty celebrity-led brand could be in trouble. You got to put your money where your mouth is. Have a legitimate restaurant, not just one that a celebrity is the face of.
You've got to survive on a lot more than your celebrity name. The restaurant business is entirely too competitive for that.
Totally. That is so true. And with that, Jonathan, we conclude another Quick Bites. If you would like more on these stories and much, much more, please go to nrn.com and restaurantbusinessonline.com. There is much more to dig into, but please also subscribe to our YouTube channels where you can continue to find these lovely Quick Bites videos. Jonathan, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our wonderful producer, Kimmy Spoons.
Thanks, Spoons.